Daniela Walls filling in for Dr. Webster Tarpley. Now, for the remainder of the show, the last three segments, we have a big issue to cover, sort of a different issue, but a big austerity issue. We've been covering austerity issues in the rest of the show. Each segment, a different person fighting a segment of austerity and fighting for your future. My friend Michael Chiotinis is here to help me cover this big topic. And here it is. Middle-class girls in America are turning to prostitution to pay their student loans. On a site called, well, this is one, the major site is called seekingarrangements.com. That's the number one site. There's many sites, turns out, and that are cater to sugar daddies and sugar babies. And this is the rise of middle-class prostitution in America. America is coasting on the fumes of the New Deal, and now we have the phenomenon of sugar babies and sugar daddies. We have to do justice to this major issue. This is a big issue. This is a big form of austerity, and this is what austerity gets you, and it makes me mad. End austerity. What answer would any Democrat or Republican possibly have to say if told millions of middle-class girls in America are prostitutes now, prostitutes to pay their student loans? And this is the result of decades of your failed policy. During the collapse of the Roman Empire, there were vacuums created by impotent central governments, and economic despair throughout Europe were filled by what we now know as feudalism. Cliques of wealthy aristocrats throughout the former empire organized armed gangs, protection rackets, and utilized formerly prohibited or suppressed institutions like gambling, usury, and prostitution to enhance their power and land holdings. Similar systems have continued to exist wherever poverty and oligarchy collide. Today, the feudal relations associated with the Third World or the post-collapse Soviet Union are now making dangerous inroads into the economically depressed United States and into Europe, where Michael is. And what oligarchs have long sought, population reduction, arbitrary power, and fealty to serfs, is coming into view. It is here. Nowhere, perhaps, is this more readily apparent than the sudden emergence of this seeking arrangements prostitution among educated Western middle-class women. We are now living in the world of Brandon Wade, who uses this is the founder of Seeking Arrangements, who uses his famous quotes, "Love doesn't exist and love is for poor people," to market the concept. Brandon Wade is the Asian American entrepreneur, MIT graduate who also worked as a consultant for Booz Allen Hamilton, and now founds the website Seeking Arrangement. As reported by The Atlantic in How Sugar Daddies Are Financing College Education, it says the website allows cash-strapped young co-eds to connect with middle-aged or elderly men willing to pay thousands a month for their companionship. Published reports and profiles about the users of this service make it clear that this is sex for money. This is a sex for money arrangement with Wall Street bankers, tech entrepreneurs, and a few at the top ending up with their own personal harem of co-eds. I was shocked to learn that Seeking Arrangements has 3.6 million members. 3.6 million members. There's 350 million in America. 3.6 million members with these babies outnumbering the daddies about 10 to 1 and growing quickly. What used to be the preserve of women with troubled childhoods and drug addiction has, thanks to this Wade's marketing savvy, become increasingly acceptable to middle-class women who in generations past would be thinking about family, children, career, with the cost of education representing only something that was a minor obstacle. In the U.S. and Western Europe, most notably hard-hit Greece, where Michael's about to answer some of our questions, an astonishing number of women are turning to these arrangements, pornography, or even outright street prostitution and stripping to hang on to what they expected out of life. In third world countries, we know that women turn to prostitution because they face literal starvation. But here we have a different dynamic. It's a middle-class girl like myself from a middle-class family. I learned to expect certain realities, like mainly that you would go to college. And it appears that middle-class girls now will do the worst extreme thing, which is prostitution, to hang on to this expectation of an education. I'm disturbed by it. And when I began my research on the subject, I learned how badly Greece was affected by this since the crash. So I called Michael to make sense of it all, and he is here today. Michael?
Hello, Daniela.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Yes. Now, let me tell you, when you asked me to look up this seeking arrangement thing, because you wanted to work on writing an article on the subject, well, first of all, I had no idea what that was. And I was really surprised with the cynicism of the whole thing. And also, I had never, till that day, thought to look at how the crisis and austerity is manifesting in this area of activity, to put it kindly. And it was by luck, the exact same day, this article about prostitution in Greece had come into my attention. Well, here in Greece, what we have is simple. The rich getting richer, the middle class, it has disappeared, and the one-time poor are now destitute. But this seeking arrangement, I don't know, it's like a tale of about a society breaking apart, becoming two societies. Um, but firstly, you were telling me about your experience in San Francisco, where you met those girls. Tell us about that, because it's really hard for people to believe this. That's my problem, to believe this.
Yeah, it was actually horrific. I didn't know what this was either. And then I came through the research to find out how big it was, 3.6 million. And I was horrified when I called you. I was with girls who are in their early 20s visiting San Francisco this week, and they're almost all apparently on this website. And maybe it's especially to survive in an expensive city like San Francisco. But I was really disturbed and asked a lot of questions, and this is serious. Millions of women in America are turning to websites like Seeking Arrangements. I've learned to pay for their college loans mainly. And then there's also living expenses. These girls were living in studio apartments with 2 or 3 in the same room and going out just to pay for meals and to subsidize the cost of living going on this website. And this is what I had always associated with third world countries. And it just hit me. This was an example of economic breakdown, and it's not coming. I realize that it's here. And I think we should raise bloody murder about this. I called you, I called Webster, and I said, let's raise bloody murder about this. Where are the feminists, first of all? I don't see much from them online. I searched feminists, what they had to say about Seeking Arrangements. No, I didn't find much. Where are the feminists? Where are the politicians? Where's Elizabeth Warren, who gave up on her 0.75% loans to the Fed? I blame her for this. And where's Hillary? We'll be back on the other side with Michael Chiotinis. We'll just get to this crisis. Yellow Walls filling in for Dr. Webster Tarpley, here with correspondent in Athens, Michael Chiotinis, friend of the party. We are talking about a sort of different subject, but an example of atrocious austerity, a dating website called Seeking Arrangements, which when I found out about it, hit me like a ton of bricks, and I realized the future is not coming, it's here. And I was saying before the break, where's Elizabeth Warren? I blame her for this, who gave up on her 0.75% loans from the Fed. And where's Hillary? And now, so
yes,
sorry.
You're right. Where's Hillary? Didn't Hillary? Didn't she come out this week and talked about the debt-free college or something?
Yes, she did. I was going to say that. She did come out because this is such a big deal, because she knows she can win the election if she talks about debt-free college. But here's what scares me, Michael. There's no specifics. They always say all sorts of stuff when they're campaigning, but that doesn't mean that when they get into office, they're going to do anything. It was actually her aide, Mook, who said it. And that's the problem with all of these candidates that are flooding onto the scene for president. They have no specifics. They're paying lip service to all these big left talking points. But where's the beef? She said that we would have to work on student loan debt. And I think she has some bill, but it's very complicated. And it was her assistant that let fly but strategically the words free college, which will help her get elected. And everybody's rightfully excited about it. I'm excited about the idea, but where are the specifics? I don't get excited necessarily until I hear specifics, like where are the 0% loans and free state and community tuition. At least Obama has his 2 years of community college for free and a plan to make that happen. So another thing I also saw that's scaring me, Michael, are the devastating psychological effects that are manifesting. This used to be the domain of only people with troubled childhoods. And I think we will start to see more and more people what I saw were these people who came from relatively decent childhoods, and now they're in this brutal, brutal world. The dating scene is a brutal world, and it has psychological effects if they're engaging in prostitution and not coming through unscathed, and it's going to have effects on society as a whole.
Yes, of course. I was also thinking about, of course, what does that phenomenon mean for society? But yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. The psychological effects or the psychological circumstances in which this can happen is not just interesting. It's kind of scary, actually.
No, it is, because despite what some may think, the assumption that prostitution is sex or simply sex is just wrong. It is, in reality, sexual violence, and it's a last-ditch measure of economic survival. And that's what we're seeing. I was reading a study published by Melissa Farley of the San Francisco Prostitution Research Center, and I have that in my notes. And one survivor of prostitution called it paid rape. And how are they going to deal with this?
Yes, it certainly devalues our human connections, true human connections. It's a terrible loss for individuals, and it's a terrible loss for society as well. I watched this White House Correspondents' Dinner where a comedian said, "It is so glamorous to be at the Washington Hilton," as a prostitute might say to a congressman, and then they all laughed, and that's not so funny. I don't think it's funny.
It's not so funny. No, it's not funny. Seeking arrangements, it's big. It's a big thing. How is it mainstream? Meaning, you were talking about the White House Correspondents' Dinner making light of prostitution. This thing's written up in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes. It was covered on the Dr. Phil show, where Dr. Phil is sitting there laughing at it, almost, because he wasn't aggressively against it, he was almost complicit in it. So, and I can't find the feminists. So,
yeah, of course, yes, this should be a big issue. The interesting thing about this is that nobody's attacking this. You're absolutely right, and no defense is up. We should act. We should act fast, and we should act deep. And this is a huge thing that's not getting the attention it deserves. You're right. Where are the feminists?
We have to hammer Hillary and Elizabeth Warren with these statistics every chance we get, any place we can get to them. If you have mass unemployment and you have the breakdown of families and a bunch of desperate women who can't maintain a standard of living of whatever level they grew up expecting, this is marketed to the middle class. A lot of girls on this site are middle class. And what you're seeing is them in danger of precipitating into the lumpen proletariat. And once they start this, down into the world of, the pickpocket thieves and prostitutes, and they're holding on with their nails to staying in the middle class. They'll do anything to keep that middle class, that expectation.
Yes, that's interesting, actually, that is that they are marketing it to the middle class. So is there such a thing as a middle class anymore when that begins to look normal,
The marketing of the website and the appearance is middle class. If you look it up, seekingarrangements.com, and don't go on it, just look at it. No matter how desperate you are. But the marketing of this website is middle class. But in reality, what's really happening is that you're going down to the depths of the lower orders, and you're in denial that that's what's happening. It's on every level. The problem for the middle class is if the income of the middle class goes down, they don't want to give up things like education. They try to keep things like education because as a badge of being in the middle class, but they have to find all these ways to finance it, to go into debt. They go into debt to finance it. I talked to these girls at length about this, trying to really understand what the core of this phenomenon was. And they'll do anything to be able to pay to go to college. So they do this. They make grim
definition of the middle class.
Yes. They make grim, determined efforts to try to keep the middle class status. But then it's confusing because they ultimately don't. I mean, I was talking to Webster Tarpley, and he explained to me that since the GI Bill at the end of World War II, the badge of the middle class is you go to college and you own a home. Those are the two main things. Now that the material basis for this no longer exists, we have this character from MIT who invests, he comes up with a seeking arrangements website. So now the world is run by Brandon Wade. We're living in the Brandon Wade world. And this needs to be thrown at the Republicans. Hey, Republican, your women my age are turning to prostitution. What about family values? Your daughters are going to become sugar babies. What about that? Republicans, we need to throw this at the Democrats. What about feminism? Ask Hillary where she sits on this issue with all of her feminism, and Elizabeth Warren. And I think that this is something that is so sickening to the average middle class person who has a child. I spoke to my uncle about it, and I said, what do you feel about this? And he was sickened by it. My father was sick over it. So we need to beat them over the head mercilessly. You in the establishment have let the real wages fall to a point where middle class girls are becoming prostitutes, and you don't do a goddamn thing about it. And then, like you said, you go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner and you laugh at it. So this is a flank. This is an unprotected area. We're not a party with a lot of money. We need to find flanks that can really get to the heart of how people feel, because sometimes abstract economic concepts don't always connect. And so these politicians don't have any arguments. If you could catch a politician on this in a public debate, they'd be tongue-tied, flat-footed. They wouldn't know what to say about it. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Filling in for Dr. Webster Tarpley, here talking about a social phenomenon called seeking arrangements with friend of the party, Michael Chiotinis.
Yes. So you were talking about big arguments that politicians can make, and theories. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna talk about the theory right now, because we also need theory. And what this phenomenon really reminds me of is a lecture I once watched by this guy Robert Reich. Mm-hmm. A very interesting lecture. Reich was the labor secretary under the old Clinton. He's kind of a mild Keynesian, not even a proper Keynesian. He was talking about, the title of the lecture was "How Unequal Can America Get Before We Snap?" And he was making this metaphor where society is like a rubber band, and that the rich get richer and richer, and the poor get poorer and poorer, and the gap between them it becomes enormous. It's like stretching a rubber band, and one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to snap back, in other words, come together again. That's what we're trying to do, mm-hmm. Reduce inequality, or it's going to snap like breaking in two pieces, And that's what seeking arrangement reminded me of. These two societies,
Yeah, but I think about that too. I think about how far can we go down. This is a question I'm always trying to answer. Can we become Jakarta, where we're eating dirt by a train track? Because we know what human beings can withstand. We see people with babies with distended bellies in Africa, and nomadic people and refugees. We see what people can we go that far? I don't think so, because of this idea that we have expectations. at least this generation saw the way our parents lived. So we have certain expectations that other countries don't necessarily have, but we already have two societies, like the rubber band idea you said. I mean, this is an important point to make, because that's the reason we don't get things like maglev, because the ruling class doesn't rely on public transportation.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
It's happening so fast that people are still able to remember what life used to be like. It's not, feudalism where you're a serf or a slave and you work at your boss's fields, and this is the only reality you ever knew. Our society remembers where it was not so many years ago, right? So this cannot work. The level of this sense of misfortune is simply too high for things to go on as they do right now.
Okay, yeah. And this is not just an American problem. I want to get to this because you're in Greece. This is international. When I said in the beginning, I was researching this and I was astonished at the Greek numbers. Greek prostitution jumped 150% since the economic crash. And I wanted to ask you, maybe this is a little simple, but is this a look into the future? Like what's happening in Greece? Because I was reading an article where a trained physician prostitutes 3 clients a week out of her clinic. She doesn't have 3 girls that are clients. The physician herself is the prostitute to 3 clients out of her clinic to be able to, make ends meet. So, and then also you have this dangerous flight of physicians out of the country, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. Let me tell you, something like 16,000 doctors have migrated to other European countries or to the US, to Australia, all over the world. But these may not seem like a lot to you, but this is a country of 10 million people. And put in perspective, these numbers are huge, And prostitution, the staggering thing I found out researching this is that in recent years, you couldn't find a prostitute of Greek nationality. And now, half of the sex workers out there on the street are Greek women. That's the major change, actually.
Okay, I see. So, I mean, they were different nationalities before, and now they're Greek.
Former Soviet bloc or African countries, poorer.
Yeah, so you've gone down to like a third world status like that. This guy Wade's new project is also, I just before we run out of time, I wanted to mention it because I think it's like he's ruining civilization. It's called Open Minded, and this is where married people go out and cheat. I just think this guy's out to ruin civilization.
Well, let's not get carried away. When someone simply creates the platform, well, that's bad. But what is important is that the demand is there. Yes, of course, it's a bad thing to make it seem okay or cool to do this. But the really bad thing is the policies that have created a society where there is demand for such services.
Yeah, exactly. So, what are the policies?
The policies, financialization. All these things we talk about, market dictatorship, as I like to call it, deindustrialization. And of course, what follows is austerity and falling wages and dismantling of the social safety net, tax hikes on the middle class, rises in tuition fees. That's austerity, make no mistake. And unemployment is really part of it. It's part of the design of all this, unemployment. It's not an accident. It's there as a threat to whoever dares to question working conditions or wage levels. It's there as blackmail so that wages can fall. That's how it has worked in Greece, at least in the last 5 years under austerity.
The people from the Tax Wall Street Party pulled some statistics for me, and I have them on my desk. And maybe I should just read it because it's all over Western Europe now. In Germany, let me see what they have here. Out of 3,200 students polled, 1 in 3 would consider prostituting. 4% already have. I'm not sure if that's a current statistic or that's from before college was made free, because Germany recently had made free higher education, so that might be before. But There was the same poll in Paris. 29.2 would consider prostitution. In Kiev, 18.9 would consider it. A similar poll in UK, 27 would consider working in a sex work escort related job. 25% of strippers and dancers in Leeds, UK, are students. So 25% of the strippers in Leeds are students. I mean, this is just crazy why higher education is so expensive in the modern world. Jeez. London-based Trade Street Project says 2,000 of sex workers treated in 2011 were students. 40,000 French students engage in prostitution as a side job due to the economic hardship. This is interesting. I mean, this is my own opinion, but education is relatively low in France, but I think that's because of the cost of living, which is just untenable across the board. Last time I was in France a couple years ago, nobody was even out in the street or driving in the roads. It was like a ghost town, and I was so confused. So I talked to people my age, and I was like, why isn't anybody out? Why isn't anybody on the road? The roads were just empty. And they said, we can't afford to go out. We can't afford a car. We can't afford gas. So is that similar to Greece? I wanted to ask you that.
Well, Greece, that's a big story because we actually have free education. But the thing is that we're spending money as a society to educate everyone, and then we don't have the jobs to put them to work. So then the youngest and the most creative and the best educated leave the country, and all this capital, human capital, is lost for Greece. That's our problem. This human capital is gone. It's used to serve other economies, exploited, if you like. That's the tragedy, and that's what we call brain drain here in Greece, because it's actually the best minds that leave the country.
But what are the numbers? Like, Greece has 60% youth unemployment now, and there's an article I read from the BBC that was sort of scary. It was called "Love in the Time of Crisis," and one young man said that the crisis has forced love to become a secondary priority. There's other things to worry about. He said, I see many women looking for someone who will have money to take them out, who will take them on holidays. But Michael, that sounds like the end of the show for this week. Let's continue this. Maybe you could be a guest this week on United Front Radio. We'll do a full hour on this topic. You're listening to World's Crisis Radio. Thank you, Michael.